Welcome once again for visiting us in these very interesting, powerful creation science conferences.
Welcome once again for visiting us, me also, in these powerful creation science conferences, takedown conferences. Hey, if you're not bothering with modesty, neither am I.
I can't think of a better way to start out this second part about mutations than to look at the human eye and to hear from none other than Charles Darwin. What does he think about it?
What did I say about quote mining? Last time, what did I say? Do you remember? Do you remember how I quote mined the shit out of you to make it look like you were saying evolution was true and creationism was false? Do you remember that? That's exactly what you people do when you bring up this fucking stupid I quote. Did you actually read the part of the book that it's contained in? What follows it? No, of course you didn't. You've never read the book. You would never read the book because you're afraid that it contradicts the Bible, and it's gonna put Satan in you. Nobody has any use for out-of-context quotes from long-dead scientists. And even if you weren't just blatantly lying about the content of this book, it would not matter, because evolutionary science was so utterly new at the time of Charles Darwin that he couldn't possibly have known how everything worked. So of course there would be gaps, there would be things that he didn't understand, but that has nothing to do with the modern world. Origin of species is not scripture. Charles Darwin is not the Messiah. He's someone who had a decent idea, tried to come up with some of the answers to some of the questions that it raised, and wrote it all down. His contribution ends there. Evolutionary science no longer depends on Charles Darwin at all.
Where I live in central Mexico, part of our state of Zacatecas, we have what are called the people that have the wolf gene.
That's what they're called, is it? It's very precise. I approve.
In that they grow a lot of hair, especially on their face and other parts of their body. Here's a picture of our present governor.
Really? Your governor's a little hairy kid with his hand in his mouth?
And some of the children there, as you can see, this outgrowth of excessive hair and facial aspects of them.
Oh, I see it now. There's two hairy kids and a guy in the background who I didn't notice because your picture quality is so goddamn shitty.
Now, this is a mutation. It's something that just happens to them. These people, as the article in the newspaper explained, usually get jobs working in circuses as novelty items, the hairy people. Kind of an unfortunate thing in a way.
Nah, bro, if you got a monopoly like that in this economy, you're all set.
Here's an example of a mutation. And of course, the thing that we're going to see throughout this and conclude is that the mutations only cause what's already there. More of it or less of it.
More or less, yeah, for the most part. Which, of course, is why, for example, whales and humans have basically all the same parts, differing really only in form. So, with that out of the way, I guess I can just skim your examples, can't I?
Chicken without feathers. This young man grew to a height of almost 9 feet. These people from the Wadomo tribe of Africa have what's called ostrich feet mutation. This happens to some people too with their hands. They have like lobster hands, twinchers. Now the thing is, it is unfortunate. And by the way, this is a result of sin. Because when Adam and Eve sinned, then the biological degeneration began. It's manifested itself in many ways.
So as we learned in the original video for episode 10, this part of which I never actually showed, but I discussed, genetic deterioration, whatever that means, resulted in we can't fucking have babies with our siblings anymore, tear, and now we've learned that it also has resulted in some people with too much hair, a featherless chicken, Robert Wadlow's case of pituitary hyperplasia, and 4 people with ostrich feet. You know, honestly, for as bad as you make this meaningless term genetic deterioration sound, it actually doesn't seem that bad.
Dr. Werner Gitt of the German Federal Institute of Physics and Technology has written a book called In the Beginning Was Information. And he states here very clearly, and he ought to know from all of his experience in computers and science information. There is no known law of nature, no known process, and no known sequence of events which can cause information to originate by itself in matter.
Werner Gitt is an engineer. You said as much yourself. His experience in computers and the science of information. Okay, an engineer is no authority on organic chemistry and biology. I know, unbelievable, right? I mean, hell, you're a chemist, and you're totally an authority on biology, geology, physics, and everything else, right? Oh, and don't get me wrong, that's totally legit. But for everyone else, they're only authorities in the fields that they're experts in. When they talk about fields that they have no expertise in whatsoever, their opinion matters as much as a layman's. So no, John, he ought not to know. But the argument, what little of an argument there actually is, should still be taken down because of course I don't want to commit an ad hominem fallacy by saying the guy's not a biologist, therefore his argument fails. That would just be rude, and we Canadians don't do rude. But since I don't really want to spend 10 minutes on it, I'm going to outsource it. Martimer81 has a video on DNA and information, which I think is pretty good that you should check out. I also think you should subscribe to him because he's doing some pretty good stuff. He's been taking down that fucking stupid spirit science channel that I hate. And if you think Christian creationists are stupid, spirit science is definitely stupider. So yeah, go watch Martimer81's video and subscribe to him.
And so the thing is, evolutionist, what are you going to do to make these different changes? By chance happening? Mutating what's already there? It just doesn't work that way.
What? Let's just review how you structured that point. There is no known law of nature, no known process, and no known sequence of events which can cause information to originate by itself in matter. Therefore, chance happenings, i.e. mutations, are impossible, and evolution can never occur because mutations can never change existing DNA? What the hell are you talking about?
Dr. Lee Spenter, in his book Not by Chance, points out that all point mutations that have been studied on the molecular level turn out to reduce the genetic information and not to increase it. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Dr. Lee didn't pay attention in biology class. A point mutation, for one thing, does not mean every kind of mutation. It means a specific kind. In particular, that is when a single nucleotide is replaced with a different one, or the insertion or deletion of a single base pair. You'll notice then that with a point mutation we can do one of three things. Replace one nucleotide with one other, leaving the amount of information the same, delete a base pair, reducing the amount of information, or insert a base pair, increasing the amount of information. So I'll play you this clip from Martimer's video that I mentioned earlier because I suspect that this argument relates to replacing information with other information and the assumption that the eradication of the original information means that the information content was reduced. And that's what Martimer is discussing here.
Here's an experiment you can do at home. Open Notepad or the equivalent thereof. Write a 5-letter word that you think has great significance. I'm gonna pick a word that I'll assume you will find very significant. Jesus. Clearly there's information there. Save the document and check its size. If you use Notepad, it should be 5 bytes, 1 byte for each character. Now open the document again and replace the word Jesus with a random sequence of 5 letters. Let's say BTKMD. This means nothing, right? Save and check the document size again. It's still 5 bytes. How can this be? We've replaced information with random gibberish. The information has been destroyed. It should be 0 bytes, right? Well, the reason why it's still just as much information is that it's still 5 letters. What the sequence formed by those 5 symbols means to the reader is completely irrelevant. If you think BTKMD, or whatever sequence you picked, is less information than Jesus, then you are not using the word information as it is used in information theory.
Would it be possible to clone dinosaurs? Of course it would. We just need one thing more. We're going to clone dinosaurs. What's that? A female dinosaur. But as far as the Jurassic Park movies, that's just a movie. But the thing is, they're making amazing progress in molecular biology to manipulate things at the molecular level within cells. So who knows? Maybe they can pull it off in the next 10, 20, 50 years.
I really failed to see how, as you say, manipulating things at the molecular level within cells is relevant to cloning dinosaurs when you have no dinosaur DNA to work with. Oh yeah, and pedantic people, don't give me that shit about, but you do have dinosaur DNA, there are birds! You know what the term typically refers to, fuck off.
Now, the fact that there are mutations, we can't deny. We've already looked at a couple. Here's another one that's very, very famous. This little boy has, if you can look closely, count, he has 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. The evolutionists have come to realize, hey, getting different variety by mutations is just not working. We lose information, or if it produces anything, they're just a bunch of freaks that wouldn't last anyway.
Yeah, that kid with the 6 toes and 6 fingers is just a freak who wouldn't last anyway. You know, that's a real sick fucking attitude, man. The term freak in this context only denotes someone who is physically different from you. That doesn't mean that they're unfit for survival. It means that they're just different. Yeah, he's a freak. To people like you who can't see past other people's differences. But there are lots of situations where different traits can come in real useful. 6 fingers, 6 toes, I don't know, maybe not so useful as some. Probably not too harmful either though. But to just discount every single person who has a non-harmful physical mutation as just a freak who will never get any further in life than joining a freak show is pretty dishonest, considering that they can still go get normal jobs and lead normal lives, and their traits may actually give them some superiority to you in some activities. I bet that 6-fingered kid could play a mean piano.
And so I'm not making this up. The next thing I'm going to show you is in the evolutionary literature. It first started out with the name as the hopeful monster. Now it's come up with a name it's called punctuated equilibrium. Just a fancy name to say this. Picture, if you will, a crocodile who lays eggs. And when these eggs hatch out, birds come out.
No. Show me the place in the literature that says that a crocodile gives birth to a duck, and that's punctuated equilibrium. I challenge you to show me where it says that. Obviously, you'll fail to meet that challenge because you're flat out lying. Punctuated equilibrium has nothing to do with a crocodile directly giving birth to a duck. Punctuated equilibrium isn't even close to that. No one could confuse it with that. The only explanation for saying that that's what it is that you're dishonest in the extreme. All punctuated equilibrium is instead of having long periods of constant gradual change, there are long periods of less change, and then punctuated periods where change occurs very rapidly due to big new pressures such as moving to a new distant area, or the opening of new niches due to extinctions or for whatever reason. And I would think it would be obvious that by very rapidly, one generation is not what's meant. We're still talking about thousands of generations here. A crocodile giving birth to a duck is not punctuated equilibrium, it's magic. And magic is your theory.
You say, oh, you're making that up.
You're fucking right.
I'm not making it up.
Yeah, you really are. Maybe you're stealing it from someone else and not checking your facts, but no, you're probably just making it up.
That's exactly what they believe.
Seriously, dude. Move on.
Because they've seen it, they realize they have to somehow get these other species to arise. And from mutations is just not the way to do it. So they invent this new thing. It's in the literature. They believe it.
No matter how many times you say a lie, that doesn't make it true. Unbe-fucking-lievable.
You see, where did life come from to begin with? That's the question evolutionists are afraid to answer.
That's the question that so-called evolutionists, by which I'm assuming you're talking about the actual scientists, aren't concerned with. It's not part of the field of evolution. Evolution is something that occurs after life already exists. The question of how species originate, the question of how life forms change over time has nothing to do with the very original life form. The origin of life was something that occurred before evolution existed. Why would evolution scientists study something that occurred before evolution was even a thing? It's like if you're studying to be a medical doctor, and someone says to you, well, you can answer all these questions about human anatomy and disease and other stuff, so why can't you tell me where life came from in the first place? And you say, well, it has nothing to do with the question of how to cure diseases. And they say, yes it does, because diseases wouldn't exist if life didn't originate sometime. What can you say to that? All you can say is, well, okay, that's true, but that doesn't mean that the origin of life has any relevance whatsoever in the field that I'm working in. It's an absurdity.
And of course, again, we come back to is that life comes from life. God has life. He is the giver of life. He's the producer of life.
No. It's a little known fact that actually life originated in 1972, when it just kind of appeared. I know, John, that you believe that you were alive before 1972, but I assure you, those are just false memories that happened to be in your brain when you were magicked into existence in 1972. That is the only possible explanation for where life came from.
A famous evolutionist, Richard Dawkins, in his book, The Blind Watchmaker.
Quote mine coming up. Let me guess. Richard Dawkins believes that evolution's impossible, right?
Says this, we have seen that living things are too improbable and too beautifully designed to have come into existence by chance.
Chance, close enough. That's what you idiots think the theory of evolution states anyway. You're really pissing me off today, man. I am really not happy about you. I'm keeping this big nice smile on my face because I want to appear congenial. But you're just such a fucking sleazebag.
Not bad for an evolutionist to recognize that. And here's the concluding statement of a historic conference in Chicago on the topic of macroevolution. Remember, macroevolution are accidental, favorable changes from one species to another. This was held in 1980. And here's the comment. The central question of the Chicago conference was whether the mechanisms underlying microevolution, those little bitty changes, can be extrapolated on a whole large scale to explain the phenomena of macroevolution. At the risk of doing violence to the positions of some of the people at the meeting, the answer can be given as a clear no. You can't add up all those little changes.
Are you serious, man? If you would read the next sentence, you would see that what they're talking about is not whether macroevolution is true, but what mechanism primarily drives it. This is a conversation on punctuated equilibrium. That's why the article goes on and on and on about Stephen Jay Gould, and why it talks about whether the modern synthesis is correct, not whether the origin of species by evolution is correct. I've provided a link down below to the first page of this article. I did manage to find the entire article, so it is out there. Just search for the article's title and you'll find it. Quote, the central question of the Chicago conference was whether the mechanisms underlying microevolution can be extrapolated to explain the phenomena of macroevolution. At risk of doing violence to the positions of some of the people at the meeting, the answer can be given as a clear no. What is not so clear, however, is whether microevolution is totally decoupled from macroevolution. The two can more probably be seen as a continuum with a notable overlap. Now, does it really make sense to you that if the first two sentences of that quotation are denying speciation through evolution outright, that they would go on in the directly following sentence to say that it exists? If you'll continue reading, you'll see that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about whether it exists, they're talking about whether it's driven by this or that particular mechanism. This is a matter of details. This is not a matter of big picture.
And what are we actually finding? Are we getting new species? No, we're losing them. We'll never see again the giant sloth. The dodo birds are gone. There was a time in the 1800s that clouds of passenger pigeons would darken the sky at noonday. There's not a one left. We have massive extinctions occurring because of man. We're losing species. Not a single new one has come forth.
And for how long exactly have we been eradicating thousands of species? Couple hundred years, probably, at most? Even call it 1,000. You're not going to see new species in 1,000 years. Obviously. Not to mention that if we're destroying animals' habitats and taking them over, we haven't exactly created a new ecological niche for new animals, have we?
2 heads better than one? Here's a fish, 1 body, 2 heads. Would he be better off in the world today? No, he'd be in trouble almost from the start in real life.
Some mutations are bad. Therefore, all mutations are bad. I can logic too.
And would you like to see the animal that for Darwin gave him a headache, according to his own words? Now, we already talked about the platypus, but Darwin, when he looked at the peacock, he says, nope, that bird should not exist. One is Darwin could never see any value in beauty in nature.
I don't know what Darwin's quote was, but somehow I doubt that he said, that bird is beautiful, that means it's worthless and shouldn't exist. Really doubt that was his point.
And especially in the peacock, that great big tail. It's going to run slower, can't fly as high, shouldn't even exist. Should have been extinct a long time ago.
No? As long as it can fly high enough and run fast enough to escape its predators and catch its food and get where it needs to go, who cares? If it meets those conditions, those stop being real handicaps. And if the females have evolved to sexually select for bigger tails, then it's a benefit, not a detriment. You know, would you say the same thing about people? Well, we don't have big claws and we're not as strong as a gorilla, so we should have died out thousands of years ago. Clearly not. Because while we don't have those particular adaptations, we have adaptations that work for us in our environment. And that's all that matters for any species. It's not which one's the strongest, or which one can fly the highest, or run the fastest. All that matters is, can it survive in its environment, and can it reproduce, which in the case of the peacock is obviously pretty important because it's sexual selection driving the growth of that tail.
But guess what? God has given to the peacock an amazing instinct and strategies that peacocks in the wild keep on living and reproducing because they were designed by their creator.
So you're saying the tail might be a handicap unless they had instincts that would allow them to work with the tail. Okay, so why do you think the theory of evolution doesn't cover instincts specifically? I mean, the theory isn't just concerned with the external form of the thing. I don't know why you think that instincts are the thing that sets it aside as being definitely designed. Instincts are just as well explained by evolution as anything else.
If we could summarize the mutations, we'd summarize it in this way, that of the mutations, 99% are harmful or useless. Notice in your textbooks, whenever they talk about mutations, all the mutations they show are mutations that are harmful.
Quote from a textbook. Mutations are quite rare. This is fortunate, for the vast majority are harmful, although some may be neutral. Oh man, that sure was unexpected. Oh no, wait, it wasn't, because that quote is from Of Pandas and People. Funny how genetics textbooks don't say that. I'm assuming that Of Pandas and People is the only textbook you've ever held, John, am I right?
They never show you a mutation that's beneficial. Why? They haven't found one yet.
John, you're a person who believes in the concept of microevolution being true. You've said it before. You're also a person who believes that the story of Noah's Ark was true. You believe that only a few thousand years ago, the only people on the planet Earth were Noah, his sons, and their wives. You believe that all the varieties of people that we see now came from them. All these people with their different beneficial mutations. Presumably, you don't believe that Noah had 10 million species on the Ark. So presumably, you believe that he had about a few thousand animals at most on the Ark, and once they got off the Ark, they micro-evolved within their kinds, creating the vast variety of species that we see today. You can't have it both ways. If you believe in microevolution, you can't turn around and say, ha! No beneficial mutations have ever been observed, and there aren't enough beneficial mutations amongst all the harmful ones to have any effect. Everything would just die. It follows that you simply have to believe that there are enough beneficial mutations happening for microevolution to take place. You're stepping all over your own arguments, you klutz.
One mutation that they do say is helpful is people that have sickle cell anemia are more resistant to malaria. Well, that's a good trade-off.
So you'd rather have malaria than anemia, dumbass.
Blindness, cancer. Cancer is a form of mutation. It's just cell growth that went whack.
It's wicked, whack.
But see, all these mutations only mutate more or less of what's already there. Never produces anything new. The mutations cannot produce something new, as people having feathers, a frog having scales, or a dog having hoofs. Only according to their kind.
John, nobody's proposing that humans grow feathers, that frogs grow fish scales, or that dogs grow hooves. You know that. Give me a break.
You're not a result of millions and millions of mutations. You're a result of an intelligent creator, an intelligent creation. He made you, he made me for a purpose. And one of those purposes is to know him, to love him, to obey him, and to be with him forever. I trust that you'll do that as I have, inviting Jesus Christ into your life. Not just some religion, not just some God. No, the specific God, the God of the Bible, the God of the creation, the creator.
It's funny to me how much time you just spent trying to disprove evolution, and yet you never presented a single piece of evidence for the Bible being true. You never presented a single reason why anyone should believe in the God of the Bible, why anyone should accept Jesus Christ into their heart. All you did was spew a bunch of flaccid attacks on evolution, and then just insist that you should accept Jesus into your heart for some reason. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I had to cut out like half of your video because you went off on some tangent about genetically modified food and human cloning and how they're bad. You didn't even really try to connect it with your religion, even tangentially, in a video that's supposed to be exclusively about that. In this, the penultimate episode of Hello, I'm a Scientist, which was obviously supposed to be among the best because it's ramping up to what will hopefully be a wonderfully stupidity-filled final episode, you, John, decided that you would resort to arguing about something that's not even related to our topic. What the hell is the point of arguing about GMO and human cloning in a video that's supposed to be about creationism and evolution and Jesus-y. And Jesus-iness. Yeah.